Hello, today I am going to be reviewing the third studio album by American singer-songwriter Sarah Bareilles. This is the first time I am talking about Sarah's music on this channel. This album is called The Blessed Unrest, and it was released on July 13th of 2013. As I said, I have not mentioned or talked about her music, and I will say that her style of music is something that is a little bit more on the fringes of my musical taste. It's a little bit too Jason Mraz, a little bit too Michael Bublé in some places, a little too vanilla. But I also have always found, all the songs that made their way into mainstream radio, like King of Anything or Love Song, to be very endearing and very well composed and put together. The lead single off of this record, Brave, which was very huge in 2013, I'm glad to see that she had another huge hit from this album, because otherwise this album sort of flew under the radar. It was an album that you could tell she poured a lot of herself into. You can tell that Sarah is very heavily invested into the lyrics that she writes. I feel a sense of despondency and sort of urgency coming through on this record. Even the title itself, The Blessed Unrest, came from this, I think it's a quote that she found. There's this poem by Martha Graham called The Blessed Unrest, and if I remember correctly, I think she stated that's sort of where the title jumped out to her from. No artist is ever pleased. There is no satisfaction whatever at any time. There is only a queer divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that keeps us marching and makes us more alive than the others. Kaleidoscope Heart and Little Voice, her two other big studio albums, I feel were a lot more sort of simplistic and yet grandiose. They were bouncier. They were more Vanessa Carlton inspired. And I don't necessarily have any problem with that, but it wasn't something that necessarily grabbed me as something that memorable. They were nice songs, and Gravity, a song off of her first record, Little Voice, is so heart-wrenchingly painful and beautiful, and definitely carries the weight that a lot of songs on Blessed Unrest dive heavily more into, and I appreciate that. I feel she always had songs on those albums that were very emotional, but The Blessed Unrest is an actual album full of songs that are not always depressing or plotting. There's hopeful moments like Brave, the lead single, which is definitely the bounciest, the most memorable in terms of its catchy melody and sing-song delivery. It's about being unapologetically you. It's a lot of people say it's, considered to be an LGBT anthem because she's talking about, say what you want to say, let the words fall out. Don't be afraid to be who you are, speak up. The music video is so cute. She has all these different people dancing in like a park and a shopping mall. And there's this one line where someone's like, what pill did he take? Because they look crazy to people watching. But you know what? People dancing do not care what everyone else thinks about them. They are just having fun. They're just letting loose for like the first time ever. And that sort of energy encapsulates the magic of songs like Brave. And I think it was a very smart choice for a lead single. And it gave her another hit. So she definitely escaped the, one-hit wonder sort of zone like Vanessa Carlton. She became someone a little bit more storied and a little bit more, her career really progressed because of that. Chasing the Sun is another song that I'm really upset didn't actually become a lead single or a single from this album. I feel like the promotion of this album sort of ended up getting cut very short. And due to possibly it not being hugely successful, although it did debut at #2 on the Billboard, and it did have two really successful singles, one of them very successful. Chasing the Sun, although the subject matter is a lot darker, it's speaking about a cemetery in Queens and Brooklyn, and how she visited there and she visited these tombstones and wanted to sing a song about life and suddenly feeling motivated more to live, because one day we would all end up, buried. Remember that life is not meant to be wasted. We'll always be chasing the sun, chasing the new day. All we can do is try. The song is so hopeful, it's so cathartic in its delivery. I can tell that even more so than Brave, this song has this very strong urgency to it to overcome what's shrouding you and to make you really want to jump out of your seat and proclaim your love of life. Something that it can be difficult to see, especially in the sort of haze that I think surrounds a lot of the rest of this album, because then the album sort of dives into this sort of more textured and nuanced, but yet kind of hazy and foggy sort of vision of reality. And I really admire the sort of darkness that it plays with. I mean, even just looking at the album cover, it's moody textures of blues and grays. Nothing else is very colorful beyond that, besides these first two songs. There is one other song, maybe Little Black Dress, that sort of goes back in the more colorful direction, but then again, it's a little black dress. It's not a little yellow dress. Hercules has this very kind of disjointed and discordant piano back, but it has some of the most interesting lyrics that you could ever imagine being composed. It's a calcifying crime, it's tragic. I've turned to petrified past life baggage. I mean, at first you don't really understand at all what that means, but you understand that the situation is complicated, and the way she sort of weaves these very heartfelt, urgent lyrics that are so clouded and also descriptive metaphor, it feels so earnest and so heartfelt. I want to disappear and just start over. I have sent for a warrior from on my knees, make me a Hercules. I've lost a grip on where I've started from. I wish I'd thought ahead and left a few crumbs, don't we all? I'm on the hunt for who I've not yet become, but I'd settle for a little equilibrium. Understanding who you are and trying to get up every day and understanding that there's actually a reason for you being who you are, that takes a certain fortitude and mental strength that she's asking for, she's begging for on this song. And I think that's where the sort of theme of this album ties in, because it is that blessed disquiet, that blessed sacred unknowing about who and unsureness about where your position and path is in this life that actually makes life what it is ultimately. This album is not necessarily surrendering itself to misery. It's stating that misery is at the table just as much as joy and happiness are as well. You know, there's breakups that we go through in life, and we have to move on from them in a positive way, and we have to forgive, but we also cannot forget. And this album is not shying away from the misery, it's letting it in as well, and it's sort of just objectively stating its existence. Manhattan is one of the more beautiful piano ballads. It's very soft and shimmery. It does remind me a lot of Gravity, except this song is a little bit more poetic and a little bit more lighthearted, even though it's speaking about a very painful breakup, remembering how they had this beautiful relationship in Manhattan. Whether it was actually in Manhattan or not is sort of not necessarily important. It's just a representation of a bustling, busy, happy place that they were in. And now they realize that for whatever reason, they have to split apart. And she's saying, you know what, I'm going to let you have those memories and I'll have them too. But I'm going to settle for the beach. I'm going to go somewhere that's a little bit more quiet, because knowing that this relationship fell apart, I need to go somewhere quiet and I need to do a lot of work on myself. I get that sense of, after the breakup, she realized there's a lot of inner stuff that she needed to deal with, a lot of inner baggage. And her going to the beach is symbolic of her going to a quieter place, leaving her lover to have the city. I often feel that way. It's like, you can have the city. I don't want it. I don't actually think it's all for me necessarily. There's this sort of love-hate relationship that she's starting to develop with it. Where that real despondency finally comes through is on Satellite Call. This is the song that sold me 100% on this record, and sold me on Sara Bareilles as a musician as well. Because before, I never really thought a song of hers would speak to me so directly. And I didn't realize to some extent how much I'd been missing by not paying attention to some heavier hits of hers, like Gravity or Bluebird off of Kaleidoscope Heart, another song that I love of hers. Satellite Call is a ballad to the forgotten, to the lost and confused, to the depressed. This one's for the lonely child, broken-hearted, running wild. This was written for the one to blame, for the one who believes they are the cause of chaos in everything. Her voice is edited and sort of layered to have a more haunting and sort of all-encompassing sound, which creates a more sort of discordant and airiness to this record, which is unique to her music. It shows her going for a new sort of style of music that is a little bit more in the Fiona Apple direction and a little bit more in the sort of like Sarah McLachlan when she got a little bit more esoteric and heavy on Surfacing. That's an album of hers I really love. I see parallels there. There's this a little bit more, yeah, esoteric nature to the song, and she sings her Satellite Call as this cascading upwards note riff that really feels imbued with power and spirit, and yet so much melancholy. And as you know, that's what keeps bringing me back. I love melancholy in music. This is so you know the sound of someone who loves you from the ground. Tonight you're not alone at all. This is me sending out my satellite call. The comfort of you're not alone, that there are others in this great city of this New York, where you can kind of tell, this album was crafted in that sort of space. That to be alone amongst so many other people can be such a depressing feeling, but there's others out there. You may not see them, but they're singing to the heavens just as you are. And you can receive that through like that connection of knowing that we're all actually a part of this together and that we are all here to help one another. And then there's a space for us to connect, whether that's, through the internet or through music or through art, that we can figure out a way to lift each other up when we're feeling at our lowest. So I mentioned Little Black Dress. This is sort of nice, brief interlude. Satellite Call got so heavy. This is a nice sort of carefree, joyful, playful, piano-driven song where she's talking about putting her little black dress on and putting on her favorite song and just letting it all go, forgetting about all the heartache and the baggage. But there's also, in the chorus and in the bridge, there's also a feeling of her, like she says, it's time to connect the dots, realize the bigger picture. It's time to put on our, bootstraps and get to work on our lives a little bit. There's a time to be moody and depressed. But we can't spend forever moping. We have to get up and we have to see the bigger picture, be a little bit more full of action and hope. And that sort of carries through. So it lifts us up a little bit out of the darkness that is Satellite Call very nicely. And I do love how it ends on that one piano chord that's just that slight key change to emphasize a little bit of disquiet. There's that things seem so happy and then the chord just ends and it's like just hanging in the moment and you're just like, wait a minute, that's an interesting piano chord to end this song on. So something's not still quite right. Underneath all of this frivolity and fun, there really is this inner disquiet, this inner, angst. Cassiopeia is like a love song to, of course, the constellation in the sky. Coming close, now it's time to tell a story. All alone in the corner of a night sky, spiral bones of a supernova starlight fell in love with another burning bright. She dreamed of a way to ignite. Come on, collide, break me to pieces. I think you're just like heaven. So she sighs and she burns with desperation, learns to cry over love of constellations. Then a spark from a star shooting too close. They both smiled. What a day to explode. Supernovas, galaxies colliding and exploding in the cosmos. These are all metaphors for lovers chaotically swirling around a mess of a city or any sort of structure and falling into each other and out of love constantly, playfully and in a very sort of childlike way illustrating that. And that's what this song is. It has a little bit of electro pop in the background because of that bouncing beat that she has, which makes this song sort of stand out because it's the one song that actually has a little bit of that electronic beat in the background. And I just think, like I said, it's experimental and this album is experimental. So it fits in showing her going down different avenues and sort of being a little bit more explorative instead of just crafting one unique sound. 1,000 times always brings tear to my eye. She has such an ear for those haunting melodies that just captivate you. And 1,000 times is plotting, but it needs to be because 1,000 times is a lot of times. Back of the room looking at you, counting the steps between us. 105 little blades in a line from your skin to mine. And I feel it. In another life, my teeth and tongue would speak aloud what until now I've only sung. I've only written about this in my diary. I've only whispered this in the deepest of my dreams, that I actually love you and I wish that I was closer to you. And even though we may seem close in space, like maybe we're in the same room, there are 1,000 blades between you and I separating us, at least in my mind. And it definitely can relate to that because it can feel as though 10 feet is 20,000 feet when there seems to be no hope of you actually being able to connect with this person for whatever reason. And yet 1,000 times over, I keep coming back to you. I keep thinking of you as I close my eyes each night. That sort of desperation and sort of calling for this to be over in some aspects is really endearing and something I really relate to. And her crisp melodic delivery is so fresh and so heartfelt as ever. The emotions really come through so strongly in her delivery of this song. I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite songs on this record. We get a little bit more bouncy and pick things up with I Choose You. This is definitely more of a slight acoustically bent, cute Jason Mraz guitar solo song where she sings about, oh, well, I choose you. It's an engagement song. I mean, if you watch the music video, it's all these couples who posted their engagement videos, and she sings this song just sort of emphasize that like choosing of that partner, which is a very Valentine's Day kind of Hallmark aesthetic. It's not a memorable song for me in that regard, so it is a little bit filler for that. But at the same time, she's got all the spectrum in this album, and I do think the album needs to pick itself up once it gets so dark every now and then, and that's what she does with songs like these. Eden is another very experimental track. It sort of goes in a little bit more, like I said, of the direction of Hercules, with this sort of very chaotic piano, but also a little bit of that jazz-inspired backing. Let me paint a picture for you, then I'll have to teach you to see it. Illustrate the remnants of the life I used to live here in Eden. Rolled a lucky pair of dice, ended up in paradise. Very clever wordplay there, Sarah. Landed on a snake's eyes, took a bite, and ended up bleeding. So, of course, we know the story of Adam and Eve in Eden. We tried to create a perfect world in this relationship, and it didn't work in our favor. Sometimes when you roll the dice, things may seem great. There's that honeymoon stage in the relationship, but then you take a bite of that apple, you get too close, and you get burned. And she brilliantly illustrates that. The song is very jaded. It comes across as very almost argumentative, because she's trying to get through to this other person of what went wrong in this relationship. And life in Eden changed, as she sings in the chorus, is very poignantly describing how this fell apart so easily as it came together. And you have to be weary of, things that look so appealing and paradisiacal. Is that a word? I'm not sure. Because nothing is not always as it seems. And just like Adam and Eve, we could fall from grace just as fast. My favorite song on this album would have to be Islands, because it is the most beautifully constructed song. I love the ha-ha-has at the beginning because it sets this sort of sonic sort of soundscape for the song to then grow upon. It's a unique and experimental way to lead you into the song. Waiting for the bus stop, waiting for the concrete black top to settle down, long enough for me to get off and get a little ground. I'm ready for the sea change. Helpless, felt this coming from a mile away. It's like standing on the edge with just a telephone wire, trying to get to you first to say the world's on fire, holding my breath until I know you're all right, because the water will only rise. When will you realize you must become an island and see for yourself that that's what I am? She also sings later on, and see for yourself the horizon is all we have. I mean, the lyrics are so relatable. She is such a brilliant songwriter, and I will always be drawn to her songwriting style because the desperation in this song of, something is really wrong here. You can feel it in every aspect of it and in her delivery, which is, again, very pained, very poignant, very careful and deliberate. She really is, I think, in this song in particular, putting all of these emotions into one very important message, which is that all for all, that you have to rely on yourself above all others, because if you don't have a strong support, you won't be able to survive any kind of relationship. You will crumble because it sounds depressing to say that we are all islands, but we are in a way because we want to build bridges to other islands, but we have to be stable and strong on our own. The idea of well, I'm trying to reach you, and all I have is a telephone wire, this thin little connecting thread between us, and I can't get through to you, still. And I want you to be okay too. I don't want us to both drown in this breakup or in this relationship because it's not going to get easier, if we don't deal with this. It's only going to get worse. The song is very dreary, but in a way that I think it needs to be. And the discordance and the division that this song sort of imbues itself with understanding who you are and how other people see you. There's a disconnect, and she wants to clear that up. Hence you always dirty up the windows. If you keep them that way, no one's going to surprise you by getting too close. If you're not keeping a healthy connection between yourself and the outside world, she's speaking inwardly as well as outwardly. And so this song carries just all of this energy. It really makes me think of this vast sea, and this chaos of it. And I think that the discord and the rhythm of it all fits very beautifully together like a puzzle to create a really well composed song and something very different for Sarah's sound. We end on a little bit more of a country leaning song, December. It just has that tinge of country in the guitar, but I don't mind it whatsoever because it has a little bit of a return to home feel. It has a more calming effect. She sings about December and about the new year. December is that month where we always kind of reflect on the year we've had, and we're about to enter a new year where we always think about what we're going to change about ourselves. December, you've always been a problem child. I love that line. I mean, how many Decembers have I promised that I would be a better person in January, and it came to just fall apart? It's almost a ruse. It's not fair what Decembers do to us by making us believe in this sort of false sense of rebirth. You run me down right restless and wild, and I remember when you used to be mine. I used to be able to deal with time's passage better. I've now been so disconnected from myself and from understanding my own calling that I need to come back to the simplicity of what time is and what the month of December is and what it means to come back to yourself, because she's not necessarily specifically talking about December here, though she could be. In the bridge, distill a whole year down into a day. That would be probably December 31st, right? Act like we all start over with a pristine slate. But to get yourself a new life, you've got to give the other one away. And I'm starting to believe in the power of a name, because it can't be a mistake if I just call it change. This so beautifully illustrates what New Year's and the struggle I have with that relationship is for me. I'm putting this review up just days before we start a new year once again, and I always run through, and I keep thinking about this song every New Year, how we do that. Every December 31st is a microcosm of what the whole year was, and then we think that all things will be reset and reimagined and renewed by this striking at midnight. And ultimately, it's the power of thought. It's the power of persuasion that makes us think, well, we really could change because it's a new date on the wall. It's a new time. This is going to be my time to change. When change does not really subscribe to that. If you constantly think that you're going to change because of some date on a calendar and it has nothing to actually do with what's going on within you, that change is never going to actually fulfill itself. Trust me, I know, because I've done this so many years where I've told myself that on the strike of midnight, something about me was going to be better. Like everything was going to be like the past was just going to be wiped clean, and I was going to suddenly feel so much lighter. And maybe for a second, like a drug, you do feel that lightness. It is like a drug. You feel suddenly so ecstatic. You're like filled with all this energy. But if you haven't, before that moment, dealt with all of this negative stuff you've been dealing with before, it's all going to just come back at the most a day, if not sooner. And then that you come crashing down almost 10 times harder. So what does change really mean? If it's just a word, well, it's way more than that. But what does it really mean? And can you really believe in change? Can people really change? And I do, but I believe that it's a much slower and it's not as miraculous of a process as being the strike turn of midnight. Beautiful, heartfelt sentiments on this album. Overall, The Blessed Unrest, definitely my favorite album of Sarah's. One of my favorite alternative pop albums of this decade so far. This album has some songs that I'll always come to in those darker moments, which I will always have in my life, and I do think it's one of the more brilliant album titles as well because it really does describe any sort of especially more introverted understanding of reality of how it is just this constant struggle to love and to live. And in a way, you have to learn to understand that it is blessed. It is the blessed unrest. You know, blessed, I say blessed, but it is this perfect balance that you find in life that when you start fighting, you start to actually feel more free and more open. This album is begging for freedom, you know, and it's begging to lift itself up and live again after a horrendous breakup or something in your life that happened that was such a tragedy. So I highly recommend this record. I'd be really curious to know what your thoughts about these songs are in the comments below. I don't know if I'm going to review Little Voice or Kaleidoscope Heart because I must confess I haven't to this day listened to every single song on either of those albums. When they came out, I didn't really pay much attention. There's a few songs on each. Like I said, I love Bluebird and I love from Kaleidoscope and I love the song Gravity from Little Voice. But other than the singles that we all know that were played on the radio, I don't really have much of a relationship with those albums, though I may build one in the future. So deep down the line, I may come back and review more Sarah, but I definitely had to review this album because this was the first Sarah album that made me stop and think, okay, I have to pay attention now because she is completely in territory that I am really, really interested in. She's been recently doing more Waitress, this musical that she wrote for Broadway, Waitress. She's been doing stuff for that. But I really hope that soon she may come out with another, you know, another full album because it's been a little while since this one came out. And I'd be curious to see what her next direction is going to be sonically and also thematically. So I hope you enjoyed this review. As like I said, let me know what you thought in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will continue to do more reviews. I hope you enjoyed them. So thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Peace, love, and light. Happy New Year. Bye.